Welcome everybody to our City Council meeting. I'd like to call to order our October 25th meeting of our City Council to order. We're going to start with the, we have a special group here coming this evening from our city here. If they would like to start the meeting, they're welcome to now.
4-H Club.
4-H Club. Come on.
Pledge of Allegiance. Who's leading? We have a... Okay.
Come on up.
Don't be shy.
Mike is over here. Helping him out.
Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're now going to do the 4-H pledge. I pledge my head to clear thinking, my heart to greater loyalty, my hands to larger service, and my health to better living, for my club, my community, my country, and my world.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hi, welcome to City Council. You have a few words to say to us here?
Yes, I'd
Great.
like to say a few words on behalf of our club.
Great, thank you.
I'm Victorina Jeffers, and I'm the Vice President of the San Carlos Eaton Hills 4-H Club. And the club has been a big part of my life for the past 7 years. And it's helped me develop my leadership skills and public speaking abilities. Head, heart, hands, and health. These words are the foundation of our club. I pledge my head to clearer thinking. When issues arise, junior team leaders are called upon for insight and ideas about the problem. Verbal reasoning is an important skill that we practice through troubleshooting an issue. I pledge my heart to greater loyalty. When we come together for our monthly meetings, not only do we learn to care for animals, but we learn to care for each other. Whether it be helping with an animal at fair or just filling in a friend who was absent at the last project meeting, we all have friends we can count on within the club, no matter what age. I pledge my hands to larger service. We use our hands for woodworking and archery, but also to give. We give handmade cards to the elderly at Christmas time, and we give toys to less fortunate children. I pledge my health to better living. Participating in the cooking project was fun and delicious, but participating in the food drive is rewarding on a whole nother level. 4-H has allowed me to experience things I would not have otherwise been able to participate in. On behalf of the San Carlos Eaton Hills 4-H Club, I would like to thank you for allowing us to continue to take part in our new endeavors, especially the Public Works and Parks and Recreations Department for support in repairing our club. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you all very much for coming this evening.
Yeah, I'm getting the idea that they don't want to stay for the later discussion items. It's really exciting, guys.
Also, as part of our agenda this evening, earlier we had actually candidates. Actually, we had 8 candidates that actually have applied for the Economic Development Advisory. I'm proud to announce this evening that Cameron Johnson has actually been elected or nominated here for the Economic Development Advisory. So congratulations to Cameron for that. With that,
Mr. Mayor, there's some openings if you wanted to put in a
yes,
plug
in
for
fact,
that.
why don't I make the public know, and especially people at home on TV or on the web, this is the first of actually 3 series. We had an opening in Economic Development Advisory, of course, which Cameron has taken that seat. Scott Marsters is actually joining our planning commission, who served over the last couple of years on Economic Development Advisory. We also have openings in both our Arts and Culture Commission and Park and Rec, and there'll be interviews coming up over the next month on each of those two. So we kind of thrive on volunteerism in San Carlos. These are the groups that do a lot of work for the city of San Carlos. And again, congratulations, Cameron, and to all the groups that give their time and efforts to our city. So thank you very much, Mr. Klein. Okay. With that, moving on to changes of the order of the agenda. Mr. Malty, any changes recommended to our agenda? No changes. Okay. Third on the agenda is report on closed sessions. We've actually adjusted our schedule here. We will be reconvening to closed sessions after this evening's agenda. So we'll be moving on to that later. Item 4, council communication and announcements. Mr. Griselli, anything to report on?
No, Mr. Mayor, I don't think I have anything at this time.
Mr. Klein?
Yes, I have a fire board announcement. A little bit we have to talk about tonight. First off, the dissolution process continues. Staff will be having another meeting, and we're pushing very heavily on staff to get the ball rolling on this. It feels like we're stuck in the mud a little bit, and that we know where we need to go, but we're not getting there. Another issue that I've spoken to staff about, and that we are going to probably need a report on at some point, is we're going to have a lot of retirements over the next year or so, and especially at the end of the dissolution of the fire department, and that's going to come at an incredible cost to the city. The one retirement, which it's not announced, he's not retiring yet, but when he does, our fire chief, we budgeted for that in the off chance that he was going to retire, and he's not. But the retirement payout for just the fire chief alone is a little under $400,000, and that includes sick time, holiday accrual, and vacation accrual. So, I mean, you could guesstimate that we're going to spend well over $1 million in retirements due to the aging of our fire department, and that's something I would like for staff to get us actual numbers on, to discuss it with Belmont and find out what those numbers are, and to bring it forth in a report, because the JPA agreement is very different than the agreements we have in the city. There's a lot of different costs that aren't reflective in our city MOUs that are only in the JPA MOU, and we need to be educated on why these costs are so high and how they're going to come about. So we will be discussing that with staff, and staff will hopefully have something within the next month or so to give to us as to show us the cost of all of this. And that's all I have.
Good. Vice Mayor Ahmad?
Mr. Mayor, 2 items. One is a lot of people have been getting these in the mail. This is your official ballot. There is 1 week until voting day, but one of the things you can do, I like to announce it every time, is you can take your ballot, go upstairs. There is an official ballot drop box, so it'll be absolutely collected, and you don't have to worry about if it was lost in the mail or anything else like that. Pick it up. You can say hi to Ms. Boland and all the good people in there. The other thing you will see is that there's a lot of pink on the dais this evening, and this is in recognition of Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and I'm wearing my tie in honor of a couple of ladies who are fighting a good, tough fight, but they are just the toughest and bravest women I know, and I'm happy to wear this for them.
Thank you. I have one item, actually, coming up in 2 weeks ago, in 2 weeks from now. Meals on Wheels has a special event in and around the Bay Area. They are hosting an event where restaurants are contributing a portion of their proceeds to Meals on Wheels, and we have both some activity down on Laurel Street. I don't know if many of you know, but Meals on Wheels provides thousands of meals every day to the elderly at home. This last year, I had a fortune to participate. And what you don't realize is not only are you delivering a hot meal to the elderly people in San Carlos, but many times you're also providing them their one time during the day of social contact with another person. Many of these people live alone. They're actually waiting for you to come with that meal. And, of course, they try to keep you to stay as long as they can to talk about what's going on and so forth. They're a precious part of our community, and Meals on Wheels does a great job. So I would like to announce on Tuesday, November 9th, which is about 2 weeks from now, will be the evening Again, if you go to the webpage and so forth, there are participating restaurants that we have in town and throughout the Bay Area for Meals on Wheels. So great organization, a great service for the people in San Carlos and throughout all the cities that they serve. So thank you to them. With that, I will move on to, we have a special presentation this evening. I believe we have Lucy Solberg is coming from our microphone. Thank you. Lucy from the junior matrons has come here this evening. But before you get your proclamation, I'm going to actually make a little reference to our history book in San Carlos. So can you hold that for a second? I got to get to the right page here. This is, of course, San Carlos Stories. It's probably one of the 3 history documents of our city, San Carlos. It's my favorite. But it talks about the junior matrons and what they've done to this town. And let me quote a few lines here before I get to the proclamation. It was a very exciting group. They were anxious to do things for the community, provide a social life for young people. We started out by having card parties and then a fashion show. You remember that? Some of those things? I don't remember them. I'm sure you do. The following year, we had a fall festival to benefit the church. We made booths for all the groups. We served dinner. And so this is a group that goes way back into the city of San Carlos. And I know you can't appreciate it from this distance, but there's a picture of a kiddie party. It looks like about 50 people in which a lot of families got together. They talk about it being in 1938. This was 3 years after the start of Junior Matrons, in which they got their husbands to dress up like children and participate in games like tricycle racing for the Junior Matron Kiddies Party of 1938. So with that, history is always something special to all of us. And moving on to a little bit more formality to Lucy and our special guest here in the second row, I would like to read the proclamation. Whereas the San Carlos Junior Matrons originated in 1935, was formed to promote friendship among its members and the community of San Carlos. Whereas originally composed of 25 women, the membership in San Carlos Junior Matrons swelled to over 200 in 1960s. Whereas the San Carlos Junior Matrons is the longest-standing women's group in the city of San Carlos. And whereas San Carlos Junior Matrons supports local organizations through their involvement with Chicken's Ball and the Kiwanis shows and can contribute to numerous charities in our town. So therefore now I, Randy Royce, Mayor of the City of San Carlos, on behalf of the San Carlos City Council, do hereby congratulate the San Carlos Junior Matrons upon its 75th anniversary and wish them many more years of providing community support in the city of good living, dated this 25th day of October 2010. With that,
to you. Honorable Mayor, City Council, and members of the staff, on behalf of the Junior Matrons, I would like to thank you for recognizing our club for our 75 years of community service, and we are looking forward to 75 more years of community service.
Great. Thank you very, very much. Wait. Let me get the microphone here. We'd like to hear what you have to say, please.
Before this building was built, you had an old city hall. Junior Matrons used to perform theatrical things in it. Wow. Yeah. We did Lady in the Ark or whatever, I don't remember. But yes, that was our enjoyment of putting on shows for the town, besides Chicken's Ball.
Great.
But it was in the old building.
Great. Well, thank you all very, very much for coming. And you're welcome to stay. There's more entertainment coming with City Council here this evening, okay? Thank you. Or are you all heading down to the Carlos Club right now? Okay, moving on to item. We have a presentation from the library's annual report and their new e-branch. Hey, Chuck, how you doing?
It's going to be hard to follow the matrons. Thank you, Mayor Royce and City Council members. It is our privilege to present the annual San Mateo County Library Report for 2009-2010. Library services are not just a community tradition, but a meaningful and enriching staple of community life. Library use continues to flourish, demonstrated by the growing numbers of borrowers and visitors. The San Carlos Library Branch maintains a strong position in the community as a resource and destination with over 320,000 visitors attending programs, borrowing materials, and making use of our electronic resources. Total circulation of books, DVDs, compact discs, electronic downloadable books, and music and other materials top 620,000. More than 1,800 items each day the library is opened are checked out. Community enrichment and educational programs presented by the San Carlos Library reached an attendance of over 22,000 children, teens, and adults this year. We provide all these services while professional librarians and library assistants are simultaneously researching user queries in person, via email, over the phone, and web. Early in 2010, the San Mateo County Library revamped our website and catalog, which is now available in English, Chinese, and just last week available in Spanish. You'll be hearing a presentation about that after my presentation. The county also funded the installation of 2 automated material handling systems in our branch, which allow users to check in their own materials and receive a receipt. These machines sort materials and allow us to get items back onto the shelves and available to the public much more quickly. The Friends of the San Carlos Library contributed over $33,000 to augment library resources. This extra funding allowed us to provide additional community programs to highlight our extensive summer reading campaign for all age groups and sponsor museum docent lectures. The Friends of the San Carlos Library also paid for new outdoor furniture for the public patios, gift books given to students attending author visits presented at their school, paid for prizes and books given to summer reading program participants, as well as augmenting other important community projects such as co-sponsoring the San Carlos Healthy Cities Tutoring Program. The San Carlos Library and the Friends of the San Carlos Library also bring together over 150 dedicated community volunteers. The library staff sets aside one day each April during National Volunteer Month to honor our volunteers. Our volunteers sort donations, keep our bookstore filled with new items every day for sale, staff our once-a-month book sale in our upstairs attics. They repair and clean library materials, shelve books, conduct story time, promote library services at our hometown days in San Carlos Art and Wine Fair booth. These and countless other small and large projects support and sustain our library, making the San Carlos Library a true center of community activity. The San Carlos Library continues to forge partnerships with diverse organizations, such as the Stanford Health Library, Bay Area Mentors, California Health Advocates and their Health Insurance and Counseling and Advocacy Program, known as HICAP, Art in Action, California Native Plant Society, San Carlos Children's Theater, San Carlos Kiwanis Club, the Museum, San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, the DeYoung Museum, and the Palace of the Legion of Honor, among others, in order to present informative and culturally enriching programs and special events. This year alone, our library patrons attended programs and classes designed to promote better parenting in English and Spanish, were coached by experts on how to be caregivers to Alzheimer's patients, how to cope with hoarding behaviors, participated in a variety of book and author discussion groups, resume building, job hunting, meditation, Medicare insurance, and health workshops. Patrons learned to knit and quilt, build their own websites, how to use social media websites such as Facebook, Twitter, and Flickr, attended family Tai Chi and fitness classes, listened to docents and authors lecturing on the art of the graphic novel and comics, Mexican cuisine, Amish quilts, Georgia O'Keeffe, Ansel Adams, the King Tut Treasures, and enjoyed a variety of live music performances. Children participated in cultural programs celebrating Dia de los Niños, Day of the Dead, and San Carlos Week of the Family. This past year included our celebrating the 10th anniversary of our new library in August of 2009. Over 2,000 citizens enjoyed 2 days' worth of celebration and programming, including performances by recording artists Baguette Quartet and folk singer Jim Stevens. The San Carlos Children's Theater performed, and we had a guest storyteller from City Hall, which was the highlight. The San Carlos Kiwanis Club provided a barbecue. Looking forward, we are now working on plans to have the interior of the library refreshed in the 2011-2012 fiscal year. The Friends of the San Carlos Library are planning fundraising efforts with a goal of raising about $450,000. We have a solid start on that fundraising effort thanks to the estate of Taz and Gwen Hoffer, longtime San Carlos residents and library volunteers, who bequeathed a generous memorial contribution. This money will go a long way towards revitalizing our interior space. We have always enjoyed tremendous support from the citizens and city officials and employees of San Carlos, and thank you for your continued support in keeping our library a vital community institution. As always, we welcome your questions and comments.
Any questions? Okay.
At this time, I'd like to introduce Michelle Loomis, Youth Services Librarian, and J.C. Escalante, Circulation Supervisor, who will do our E-Branch presentation.
Oh, great. Thank you. Welcome.
I believe we have a PowerPoint presentation.
Okay. Is that ready to go? Okay.
Thank you. Well, thank you. We are excited to announce this past spring we launched the brand new San Mateo County Library E-Branch. The E-Branch is a full replacement of our previous website, and we'd like to highlight a few features. I'll do some for the homepage now. A single user sign-on, which is seen on applications from Google. A dynamic search box, which eBay currently uses for all of their search terms. And a social interaction aspect that Google and Facebook are currently pioneering. So there's the website. The single user sign-on allows users to easily access features of our entire website, such as the databases, blog discussions, without having to log in repeatedly. The dynamic search box at the top right corner allows users to do keyword searches for our entire catalog, our events, databases, and the entire website all from one location. And finally, the social interaction includes our blogs and discussions about San Mateo County Library materials, events, and services to create a sense of community throughout the website. Other features seen here on the web page and throughout the website include easy-to-navigate promotion of library events, collections, news, and services. We also have separate web portals specific to children, teens, parents, and seniors. And improved usability of standard library resources, including our catalog, the databases, ebooks, and other materials, making a more intuitive aspect to the website.
And we're going to talk a little bit about the children's area called the kids area. And these are some of the highlights. We'll just take a look at the screenshot. And here we have the kids page, which features bright, colorful graphics, the kinds that are attractive to children. There is a link to some fun educational games. And we have some quick links to 2 full pages of resources for parents and teachers, which include information such as internet safety guidelines, lists of local parenting groups, rainy day activities, field trip information, and homeschooling resources. On this page, you'll also find storytime videos, highly visible promotion of library events, services, and resources for children, easy access to homework help, and blog posts for children as well.
The teen area of our website highlights edgy graphics, interactive features, and homework help. So the edgy graphics are designed to appeal to teens and encourage them to stay on the website and use the features. The interactivity includes shout-outs, which scroll at the very top of the website and are messages teens can send to each other, rotating polls, and blog posts allowing teens to personalize the website and really make it their own. And finally, most importantly, a link to all of our homework help resources, including our tutoring programs and other websites. Additional features on this page include easy-to-find promotions of all the teen events, highlighted library services, and teen-friendly volunteer programs.
And we're going to take a look at the San Carlos landing page, which is basically the home page for the branch library. On this page, we feature important information specific to the branch, which includes events taking place at the San Carlos Library, and some other features that are specific to our branch, the physical branch, such as information about the breadth of the collection, the disability access in the building, and the computer services we offer. We also have a page, if I can, and this is the page. It's hard to decipher, but this lists quite extensively our community partnerships. Here's where you'll find information on the Healthy Cities Tutoring Program, which is our free one-on-one tutoring program to students in San Carlos. And, for instance, a link to the Peninsula Humane Society, which provides our Paws for Tails program, which is a fun program with dogs. If I go, how do I go? Okay. And also listed on this page are important links to various San Carlos community institutions, such as the local government's website, local schools, and the San Carlos Chamber of Commerce. There's links to blog posts from our library staff. And there are pictures and videos from San Carlos Library's programs and events, and just daily occurrences such as this one of a little girl who's getting her very first library card, and she got it at San Carlos Library. So thank you, and are there any questions for us?
Great. Any questions? Great. Well, I appreciate you coming, and Chet, thanks for the presentation. Councilmember Grocott is probably sorry he's not here. He actually came ill this afternoon, but he, of course, sits on the board for the library of all 9 cities that are part of that Joint Powers Authority, and you guys do a great job, great service for our people of San Carlos. So thank you for the update. Thank you. Okay, moving on to public comment, item 6. This is the area which anybody would like to speak on any item that's not on this evening's agenda would be welcome to do so now. Do we have any public comment? I don't have any speaker cards here, but people would be welcome. Please, if you could state your name, fill out a speaker card after you speak would be fine. And again, if you could limit your time to about 2 minutes would be great. Welcome.
Mr. Evans, I live at Hillcrest, San Carlos. Sorry Mr. Grocott's not here, but I'm not speaking for him. I know he can speak for himself. As I read in the paper and listen to you people talk and how you make the comment, Mr. Klein, how he is immature in his actions. Why is it every time? Have you ever watched yourself here on TV? You act like a little baby. You too. Well, all of you guys actually. Mr. Grocott, I think you're probably more of a man than all 4 of you people up here. You put him down because he voted against the tax. I voted against the tax. The people voted against the tax. Why do you keep it up? Don't you understand what the people want? It's the people, not you, not your way. I know there's something behind you people who got you up here. There has to be. And you want to outsource and all this. You want to give this guy a $5,000 bonus because he did your work for you. It's sickening. This is my town. I live here. Another thing I want to thank you for is all the garbage cans. Looks like a ghetto in my neighborhood with all the garbage cans. Why do we need all these garbage cans? There's something wrong with this outfit too. Something wrong here. Somebody get some kind of a kickback, in my opinion. In my opinion, you people want to outsource. I think we ought to outsource all you people. Get rid of all of you. Keep the lawyer. He knows what's going on. You always ask him for answers. And the staff, whoever the staff is. Why you all go, I got to get back to you, I've got to talk to staff. And you need a chin rest every time I look at you, you're like this up here. You too, sitting up there. Did you listen to the people? Don't you know what's going on? Don't you know the people are upset? I talked to my neighbors and whatnot. They didn't want to listen. They didn't want to watch you. They didn't want to talk about you. I do. This is my town. I live here.
So if you could wrap up here.
I'll wrap it up. And the way you treated Mr. Grocott the last time,
Excuse me, I'm asking you to please wrap up, and then we'll move
I
on.
can't talk anymore. Is that what you're trying to say?
You're out of time,
You're acting
sir.
like a little Mr. Hitler, aren't you?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, really, I appreciate you coming and speaking. It keeps us balanced, hearing what some people think.
No, it doesn't. You don't listen to
And I
anybody.
appreciate you coming to this evening's council and expressing your views. Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak at this evening's meeting? Please, Randall. Brian. Well, Brian, welcome.
Brian Randall, St. Carlos. Good evening, gentlemen. I wasn't going to speak this evening, but following Clint, I really don't know what to say. I heard this evening that this was originally an entertainment barn. It still is. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Any other speakers? Public comments. It's always a favorite part of our evening. Okay, with that, we will move on to item 7, approval of the consent calendar. Do I hear a motion here?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to remove item 7B for separate discussion.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I move approval items 7A, C, and D.
Mr. Mayor, through the chair, Mr. City Attorney, do I have to recuse myself from voting on D, I assume?
Yeah, that's correct.
So could I stay up here and can we have us two separate motions, or how does this work?
I think historically we've pulled the items.
Okay, so I guess, Mr. Mayor, if I could pull item 7D, please.
Okay,
Sorry.
so we're pulling B and D. Okay, do I hear a motion for A and C then?
So, Mr. Mayor, I'll move approval of items 7A and C.
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Councilmember Mon?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott is absent. Councilmember Klein?
Yes.
And Mayor Royce?
Yes. Okay, let's go through 7B, which was pulled, is the minutes of our October 11th, 2010 meeting. Mr. Klein?
Yes, I just have an amendment so it will accurately reflect what actually occurred. My amendment is for the minutes at item 7B, page 2. And I believe it should read, Councilmember Grocott proposed a motion to delete the discussion regarding the mayor's report and subsequent discussion about Councilmember Grocott's breach of closed session. His motion did not receive a second. And then it would continue to read on.
Okay.
Move as amended.
Second.
Okay.
I apologize. Where is this? I apologize. What page is it on?
Item 7B, it does not show the...
7B.
B.
As in boy?
Yes.
Okay.
It does not show the motion, the first motion that was made that was not seconded.
Yeah.
It only shows us the
Mr.
motion.
Talking about adopting the minutes of September 27th?
Yes.
No, the minutes of October. Yeah, yes, you're right.
I'm just trying to understand what we're doing here.
7B.
7B, so you want to, okay, all right, thank you.
Would you like me to reread it?
No, I understand. I'm just trying to figure out where it went. I misunderstood where it was. Sorry.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Mon?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Klein?
Yes.
Mayor Royce?
Yes. Okay, and then now to 7D. This is to adopt resolution accepting Crestview Drive pavement resurfacing project and authorize recordation of a notice of completion.
Move approval item 7D.
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Councilmember Mon?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
He has to recuse himself.
Oh, got it. Just wanted to hear it.
Recused, please.
Councilmember Grocott is absent. Councilmember Klein?
Yes.
Mayor Royce?
Yes. Okay, great. Now we're moving to reports to council. We have one item on 8A, update on the police department transition. Yeah. Have our chief here.
Good evening, Mayor Royce, members of the City Council. Greg Rothis, Police Chief. I'm here before you with 4 business days left until the actual transition day. We will be in a transition week next week. As you know, what will happen at Saturday night at midnight is the Sheriff's Office will take over policing San Carlos. On Monday morning, this current San Carlos staff moves into a week of transition training with the Sheriff's Office. So Monday through Friday, we'll all be in training with the Sheriff's Department. During that time, there'll be a transition team in place Deputies have been selected and scheduled and outfitted and ready to go to Police St. Carl's during that transition week. And then back on Saturday evening, I believe, is when the full-time teams will come back on. You have the report in front of you. I guess I could kind of sum up everything with 2 words, which is we're ready. We have everything in place that we need to have in place to make this transition work. Right now, we do have things that come up day to day, but they're really very minor. As you know, this police department is working very hard. I talked in my report what an amazing job our staff has done in getting ready for this transition and the amount of time they've put in. And I'm very proud of them in the police department. But I'd certainly be remiss if I didn't say that it isn't just the police department that's worked on this transition at City Hall. There's been a lot of help throughout the city staff. Jasmine Frost and her IT staff. In fact, Jasmine, I think, is in there right now working on transition issues, making sure the website works good. Rebecca and her staff. And so there's been just a lot of people working extra hard to make this transition work, and we really appreciate that. Again, I feel, in terms of how I feel about this transition and where we're at, I feel very good about it. I think we've really thought ahead. We've thought for any eventuality, and there's so many people working on this and thinking through it that there's been a good job done. And so what I'd ask of you is to, once we become the sheriff, is to ask a lot of us. We're prepared to serve in the way that you've grown accustomed to with police services. And so it is absolutely appropriate to set a high bar for the sheriff's office in policing this community, and I'd ask that you do that, and we'll do everything we can to meet that expectation. On the same hand, I think you understand that during the transition, I might ask for a little patience from time to time as we work out some of the bugs that may occur. But we're ready to keep this community just as safe as they're used to being. And that's my update for now, and I'll be glad to take any questions you have.
Any questions on this agenda item 8A?
So I have 2 questions. First of all, Chief, I want to commend you and your staff. You guys have done an amazing job in this transition, and the public has been more than appreciative of what's been going on and how much you have worked. There's 2 questions I have. One, in your report you talk about your public outreach and meeting with neighborhood groups and service clubs and whatnot. How are those meetings going? What is the general perception that you're seeing?
The meetings are going really very well. I feel that the last meeting was the White Oaks Neighborhood Association, and there is a much higher level of comfort with the model. The community seems to be comfortable. Obviously, I believe that this model will keep the community just as safe. I've told the council that before, and I believe that's true. And I go to these community meetings and believing that, I'm not so sure that they're comfortable with it yet. But sometimes I feel like I'm trying to get people to be comfortable with something they're already comfortable with. I think this community understands through the education series and outreach that the staffing on the street and what they see that keeps them safe in terms of response times and calls for emergencies and the ability to take reports and to deal with quality of life issues will all still be there. It is the backroom issues that will change and not what they see on the front end. And I believe the community understands that and is getting kind of wrapping their mind around that and therefore getting much more comfortable with the model.
Okay, and then my other question, Chief, we talked about this at Rotary on Friday. Since you will become a captain in the Sheriff's Department, how are we to address you from here on out after the changeover?
Well, as I said, anybody can call me Greg, Captain, or Chief, and I don't really care, but that wasn't your question. So the idea of the model is to try and emulate as much as possible what it is that the city is used to. And the city is used to having a police chief that reports to the manager and to the council in the way that I've been reporting to the manager and the council over the years. And they title that person, although they have the rank of captain, bureau chief. And so I believe I'll be called both, but I am your chief.
So we can still continue to call you Chief, and it won't be an issue. Okay, so I want to hear. I know a lot of people have been asking that question, and I think you get ribbed a little bit about it in the club. So.
Vice Mayor Ahmad? Chief, during this transition time, when the permanent staff is going to be off training, should people still, in case of emergency, dial 911 and expect a normal response?
They should.
And those folks that are going to be responding will be dispatched out of this facility?
Yes, they will. They'll be reporting here and they'll be dispatched out of here.
So essentially, it's business as usual, even though the permanent staff is doing training, et cetera?
Exactly. There'll be some things that are different. For example, our call signs will be different. We're not going to be called the same thing on the radio, but that's not going to affect the public. And some of the people here will be new, to the area, maybe unfamiliar with some of the procedures and stuff, but in terms of responding to emergencies and handling reports, it'll be seamless.
Chief, I would only just echo what Councilmember Klein said, which we probably haven't taken enough time to say thank you to you and your staff. You've done an exemplary job, and sitting here, I can say I really appreciate all the hard work you and your staff have put together to make this happen, and you're our chief.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Caselli?
No, I echo again. I think Greg knows how we all feel, and not only you and your staff, but every member of the organization, from the person who joined yesterday to the person who's the most senior member of your organization. The police officers and all the support staff have all stepped up and done their job, as well as you mentioned, all the city staff. It's a team effort, and I agree with you. I think it's going to be a seamless situation, and I appreciate that you're going to be leading us through this.
Great. And I would just say thank you for the updates. I think you've been given one every council meeting, and we want to see more of that. And we want to keep the city as is. So we're in great shape. Thank you.
Okay, we can give them a night off every now and then, right?
I don't think you have to come every week, Chief.
And my last thank you goes to the City Council and how you shepherd the employee issues through and how you took care of the employees in this transition has made a big difference in the success and will make a big difference in the success of the model. It was evident that you cared deeply for the employee issues and all the effects that will occur on the employees. And you did a great job, and you took very good care of them, and I appreciate it. So thank you.
Great. Thank you for the update. Thanks, Chief. Okay, on to item 7, which is a study session. 9, sorry. And then we move on after that to new business. We actually have a handful of items, but again, study session is review our zoning ordinance update issues and options City Council briefing paper. Mr. Civet, welcome.
To the far left, Al, from beginning.
Should be view. There we go. Thank you. All right. Good enough. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. We're here at the first milestone in the complete updating of our zoning ordinance on the heels of our general plan adoption, climate action plan, and housing element. And what we'd like to do tonight is I'll be running through a brief overview of the zoning update project, and then we'd like to give you a presentation of the summary of the recommendations that are contained in your council briefing report, and then get into a dialogue with you about some of the key issues. In terms of the purpose of the zoning update, the purpose that you see here is taken mostly from the guidance of the general plan. And so you'll see a lot of the words that come out of the vision of the general plan there, but the zoning ordinance is something that we, the citizens of San Carlos, people that do business here, come in contact with on a regular basis. It really affects the look and feel of our community as you're walking through your neighborhood. You look at the buildings, how high are those buildings? How far away are those buildings from the sidewalk? Do you agree with the aesthetics, with the architecture? If you want to upgrade your house, do an addition to your business or a remodel to your business, you would need to find out if you conform to the zoning code. So a lot of people come in contact with this document. In terms of the objectives, there's a number of objectives that were set forth. Again, a lot of this taken from the general plan. Some of it just good business practices. Some of it is required by state law. And then at the end there, you'll see that there's something about web-based component and interface. And I think this is really critically important because once we have this great document, there's got to be a great user interface, something that is accessible to the public, to the people that use this document on a regular basis. So we're going to work hard to make this document accessible. In terms of the process, it's about a 12 to 14 month process. And we're down here in October talking to you. We've been through a good deal of community effort and collaboration here. The Planning Commission has hosted one community workshop and will be hosting 2 more in the near future. We've also gone to the Economic Development Advisory Commission. We've got a meeting scheduled with the Transportation Commission in November, talking to the Harbor Industrial Association in early November, and we meet with the Chamber on a regular basis. So there's a lot of outreach with our commissions, committees, and the public as well. In terms of the next steps, we have some technical work to do. As you know, we have a $50,000 grant from the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, and that will help us to work on our parking studies, our affordable housing, and pedestrian-oriented development components. There's a number of draft modules that go along with that, and again, the web-based and mapping links. We'll also be reporting back to you throughout the process. In terms of an overview of the recommendations, this is sort of the grand overview that you see on the screen here. That's contained in the Issues and Options Background Report. It's an exhaustive report. It talks about all the things that we discovered in our early analysis of this document as we went through it. But what we want to talk to you about tonight is to drill down a little bit and talk about some of the key recommendations that we pulled out that have more policy guidance issues. And we've talked with the community about this. We've talked to the Planning Commission. And with one of these issues, we've talked to EDAC as well. And so we'd like to give you a presentation. But before I do, I'd like to make a quick introduction. When we started down this path, we started looking for a consultant that could assist the city with this. It's a large, comprehensive project for any city. And we were, through a rigorous interview process, we were lucky to hook up with Diet and Bhatia. And Michael Diet, principal of the firm, is here this evening. I'm going to ask Michael to get up and talk about issues 1 through 4. And I'm going to come back up at the end and talk about issue number 5. And so with that, I'd like to introduce Michael Diet.
Welcome to St. Carlos. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. It's a pleasure and an honor for me to be here with you today to talk about these 4 issues that actually were well received by the council and the community, and we got some good feedback. And I wanted to talk through some of give you a little bit of a flavor for why we're bringing them to you and what we have heard on development, review, and approval. There's a confusion often when people look at an ordinance. What's approved by right? Can I go get a permit? But no, on a different page there may be some design review or architectural review. Well, what if my house and my lot doesn't exactly fit the standard lot? How do you get relief, which I think is very important? Well, it's not always clear how the relief can be granted and who can make that decision. And there's not a lot of sensitivity to some of the new ideas that people are thinking about. The corner store, we call these non-conforming uses where it doesn't fit the strict reading of the regulations. Well, increasingly best practices is to have a little flexibility in the ordinance. And lastly, as part of the whole economic development initiative, let's have a streamlined review process. We might want to have more uses as of right. If you're comfortable with the way the ordinance is going, then you delegate to the commission or to staff, subject to all the rules that you lay out. And that just makes a lot of good sense, but you can still have, of course, design review. You can allow for the administrative approval of projects, but be a lot clearer on where they can locate, whether it's San Carlos Avenue or Holly. Are there any time limits or size limits or form, physical form? A lot of zoning is about being a good neighbor. So if we're clear about these things, or we're clear in a third category, it's not just a use permit or as of right, but we say, yes, you can come into San Carlos, but let's meet certain development and design standards or certain size limits. That might make a lot of sense. The Planning Commission was supportive of this direction, but they want to make sure that we've done our homework, that we're proposing a set of compatible standards so that it's all about being a good neighbor. And we address the transition and redevelopment as the city gets some new investment. The new fits with the old. So one of the first questions we'd have for you is whether you're comfortable with that idea of a bit more by right zoning subject to standards and design review process. A second big topic that came up is really making sure that the bar is high, that we have good, high-quality design. Right now, you don't really have a lot of standards or rules in place. You have a floor area threshold, but it's a review threshold. It's not at all clear how building height and some of the other dimensional standards are applied, or how some of the rules in the middle of a district work at the edges. So those transitional requirements for neighborhood compatibility and hillside development need to be fleshed out. And it might make sense then to have a bit more detail on building site, height, facades, and landscaping, how buildings look, particularly along the street, and include illustrations in the ordinance to show what the city's expectations are. We drove around and spent a lot of time looking at how some new buildings maximize height. What are the zoning aspects of this rule? Minimum setbacks pull the buildings in, but it can go up fairly high. Here you see an example of a building envelope where the second story is pulled back from the adjacent single-story residence, and you can have rules that carry those ideas out. Here you see tall downslope walls and towering of buildings over the street and the neighbors. You can have a stepping back in hillside so that you have a layering effect and a shorter downslope wall, so you're pulling them back. These are just very simple, well-understood best practices ideas that might make sense. Here's another illustration of some elements that contribute to a bulky design, the large overscaled windows, the setback entry, the garage snout, if you will, projecting into the front living space. And here, lastly, is an example of, I think, a well-proportioned, a craftsman-like home that fits right in to the community. We spent time photographing some of the newer multifamily structures, and you can see some blank walls, limited overhangs. The massing's not really broken up. It's fairly shallow in depth. So the overall sense of volume here is a bit much for some people. Yet you have some other really good models in the community. And could we codify some of these ideas relating to the balconies, the overhangs, the articulation of form, the landscape and planning areas, so that you're telling everyone what your expectations are and you're getting the kind of development that you want to be proud of. So we heard some good things from the community and the commission, some support for having design standards and the idea of taking a look at design review to see that it's really doing the job, but making sure as well, and a couple of commissioners were fairly strong at that we're not being design czars. If someone needs a little flexibility, a homeowner does, a great architect they brought in needs to fit in, but there's still, the process should allow that. And it might make sense to have one or two members of the design profession on the reviews. In a number of committees, communities I work with, some even say planning commissioners the planning commission has to include two members of the architect or landscape architect profession, and that really brings a professional point of view. Just like if you had a finance committee, you'd want to have someone who knows about bonds and how they're issued. So too with design review, maybe that professional expertise can contribute. These are just ideas on how this would be carried out. So I leave you here with just two questions. Are there some types of projects that should always be subject to design review with more specific design-related standards? And are there any other design questions that come to your mind as you think about your drives around the community that you want us to work on? We're not tonight expecting to solve all the problems, but if you have any more things you want me to work on, of course I'll do that. A third idea emerged as you think about high-speed rail and generally connecting people and places, is that your current ordinance, which is a very old traditional ordinance, doesn't really think specifically about transit-oriented development, about what's happening around the train station. Design standards, no for that kind of development that might occur there, resulting in a lot of case-by-case negotiations and uncertainty, and developers thinking that they have in mind what the city might say yes to, but then possibly being surprised. Many communities have created transit-oriented districts. We've, in fact, worked on all of the operating rail systems from San Diego up to Seattle and are now doing transit-oriented development, in fact, over in Hawaii, and we've done it in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and on the East Coast. And it really makes sense to codify the requirements, many of which have really worked well in downtown, and think about how you tailor them to a transit-oriented area. So you're establishing the parameters and the arrangement of public spaces ahead of time, and then the designs that come to you respond. You can really require these elements of desirable urban form, ways of addressing the corner, thinking about El Camino Real and how it can really be an attractive streetscape. The commission said, yes, that makes sense, but don't just think of it for a specific project, that Transit Village project. Think of the larger area and put it in the context of not only what Caltrain is doing today, but what if Caltrain is very successful as their engineer for the Peninsula project, is really well regarded. He's going to get this all in place for the high-speed rail to proceed. And we need to think as well as we do this about the single-family neighborhoods that would be around this area. Many of those homeowners came out and spoke, and they said, make sure that, again, you're buffering us. You're not creating problems for us by overbuilding. And the mix of uses should reflect what is feasible and realistic. So we'd have to build that reality check in. So I leave you as the third question with the idea that we should we include a TOD district to encourage transit-oriented development. I think we've had generally good support for that. The fourth topical area came up from reading the housing element as well as the other chapters in the general plan and thinking whether your residential district today, your classic R1 zoning, offers the flexibility you need as you're trying to accommodate and provide for an aging population, different housing choices. And sometimes the standards that are laid out limit the ability of a developer, an architect, or a homeowner to achieve what you had in mind on that block. And there aren't opportunities for some of the alternate housing, co-housing ideas that might make sense. So you might want to say yes, in some cases, to subdivisions or projects with smaller lots, smaller than the standard lot. And these would be subject to design review and approval and allow a mix of housing types and development that is as of right but meets those standards. That harkens back to my first suggestion. And this has really worked very well in many communities. And one idea that was discussed a lot is whether there should be a minimum density established. So you're getting land used in an economically viable sense in those mixed-use and medium density areas that you identified in the general plan. And many thought at the Planning Commission meeting that if it is required, again, put some flexibility in it, allow homeowners to have some exemptions. Again, don't be draconian if you do go that route. I'm not saying that we're going to go that route, but the idea was if we did, we should make sure that we have the flexibility. And we did hear good support for this small lot subdivision idea, but with the right standards that make sense in San Carlos. So I leave you here with two questions. Should there be strategies such as minimum density or minimum height to encourage, good compact development, good reuse of your skipped over sites? And should we say yes to the idea of small lot subdivision as an option with standard? So that pretty much brings me up to the point where Al is going to take over and talk about economic growth and some of our ideas there.
Thank you, Michael. As you can see on the screen, there are a number of different land use policies that came from the general plan land use element supporting revenue growth, economic diversity in our community, as well as the creation of jobs, the idea that we should be able to have jobs in our community and live here at the same time. And so we looked at some recommendations for that after taking a look at particularly the east side is what I'm going to talk about this evening. What I can tell you is that cities do regulate the types of businesses that go into a zone. Just about every city in the state of California does do that. So there's a lot of concern that you'll hear about meddling in the marketplace, but cities do that for very specific purposes, either to target certain industries or businesses or to retain the businesses that you have. So one of the things that we looked at is the historic development patterns that are on the east side and what's there and what's emerging and what do we foresee in the future, and that's part of what we did with our general plan land use. So some of the recommendations you'll see here is to attract certain businesses and industry that do provide these fiscal benefits to the city. Support growth and investment in different areas of the city, and again, as we heard earlier tonight in the EDAC discussions and in your selection about increasing our competitiveness in the marketplace. And so what we found is when we started looking at the east side, and we sort of knew this from the general plan, but we dug a little deeper and we found that there were some unique opportunities to create a couple of sub-districts that would do just what we're talking about. On the right-hand side of the screen here, you see our general plan land use map. These light purple areas are the areas that I'll be discussing this evening. These are the industrial areas, the planned industrial zones. And so one of the interesting things to look at, in particular down in this area, let's focus here for a minute, you'll see that the streets, these white roads here, are very close together. If you look up here, the roads are far apart, and what that indicates is a much finer pattern of lot sizes. They're much smaller than the rest of this area. So what we're looking at here, what we're proposing is a district called an industrial arts district. And so traditionally the land use has been light industrial down in that or heavy industrial. What we're talking about now is a new district that would focus on the promotion of office, medical, that would be small-scale industrial and manufacturing uses in this area. And if you've driven down there, you'll note that you'll see electricians, plumbers, people who are selling glass. You'll see iron workers, artisanal tile works, people working on custom cars. It's a very unique area of the community that serves a very specific purpose, not just to us, but outside our town. And what cities need to look to do is to preserve these areas and look for ways to increase investment. Another area I'd like to focus on a little bit is this area here. And what we see emerging in this area is we have our Palo Alto Medical Foundation that is going to be under construction in the near future here. In the PG&E site, which is about 18 acres here, we have NewGen and Nextel, Nectar, that is up here in this area. So what we see emerging is this synergy of some of these R&D uses and medical uses next to what we foresee as the hospital. So we have some real interesting opportunities in this area, and the idea here would be to promote or focus on office medical research and development and other large-scale professional uses. The rest of this area that you see, the M1, the orange, would maintain your industrial, light industrial that has been the historic development pattern there, and the same in these other areas. Now, when we brought this to the Planning Commission, some of the things that they said is that zoning should look at ways for tax-generating uses, but be careful about public safety because some of the heavier industrial manufacturing uses do use certain types of materials that could be a health and safety issue. and also use a light touch when you're trying to look at the marketplace and target certain industries. One of the things that the Planning Commission did say when they looked at it is, we think that the Economic Development Advisory Commission would have more expertise in this area. Let's have them take a look at this. So that's what we did. We took it to EDAC. What EDAC said is that, yes, you should make it easier for older buildings to be upgraded, that you should encourage specific types of businesses, and they had a discussion of what they thought in their experience we should target. Tailor and relax the standards and procedures to attract these businesses, and consider even fee reductions for the smaller uses, particularly in this industrial arts area that I discussed, where you have those smaller lot sizes, smaller buildings. Some of those buildings are from World War II. You see the Quonset huts out there. And there's very little interest in reinvestment. So you have to incentivize the reinvestment in the infrastructure and the buildings there. And again, be aware of the quality of life issues. So the questions before you this evening are, what types of incentives should be considered? These are some of the things that were discussed and looked at with the EDAC, eliminating some of those land use controls, relaxing things, incentivizing investment. FAR would be adding letting them do a little extra square footage and speeding up the regulatory process. Some of the specific types of business industries, and they noted some that they thought were that we should target and look at. And so with that, we've concluded our presentation. We're available to answer questions. And Mayor, perhaps we should go back to question number 1 and just go back to the questions, or however you'd like to do it. So we could focus on that, or just general questions about the whole thing.
So first question I have, Al, would be public input. Should we try to get some of that first now the presentation is done? And then when we come back to council, if you could, I'd maybe recommend kind of organize this step by step or category by category, recommendation by recommendation, maybe. We go through those one at a time.
That would be great.
But I'd be interested first to see if the public has any questions or comments first.
Okay, good.
Fair?
Yes.
Okay. So with that, does anybody like to speak on this item or have any questions? Or you'd be welcome to do so now. Okay. Okay. Looks pretty quiet out there. Maybe quiet up here too. Let's see. Okay, you want to lead us through then and go through...
Michael, you want to go through one?
This isn't a public hearing, just a report here. You want to lead us through this?
I'd certainly be delighted to. We could go back then to the first question, which...
Before you... I just had a question. I guess this is more about process. We're going to give feedback tonight. What do we sort of expect you guys to do next?
Well, as Al was saying, based on your comments, we got commission comments, public comments, we've developed a working outline, and we'll start drafting and then take those preliminary regulations to a working group, a technical group, and see in an open session, did we get it right as we go to the next step? And then we'll take those comments on those individual sections. We've got the MTC-funded work that will be going, for example, to the transportation. There's a transportation advisory group, and they'll be hearing a presentation on the parking standards. And we'll be doing some other technical pieces on pedestrian design and on affordable housing. So each time you do a little bit, you say the model break, you draft it up, you get some comments, and you say, she said, I didn't think of writing it that way. And you do a second draft and put it together, get some more comments. We're going to have two other commission workshops on topical areas. And it's really a progressive process of get it out, listen, go back and redraft. Then we'll take a draft ordinance to a study session with the commission, get their feedback, and only then, and I think there may be one more briefing with the council, but come to you after there have been many iterations and chance for feedback, so that when we would have the commission's recommendation, it would really be a consensus piece with a lot of feedback. But we won't be going back and just writing it in the privacy of an office. There'll be a lot of open dialogue. It's intended to be a really transparent process. probably apologize. We should have had duplicated those slides for you. But this is the first question. Should we really have a streamlined by right process for certain uses so that some approvals could be at an administrative level with the right design and design review, the right standards and design review?
So maybe I'll just let people kind of speak up where they feel they have input. So, Bob, ready? Input.
Yeah, well, certainly if I was on the other side of this dais and I'd be coming in, I'd love anything that's by right. I mean, that's the best. However, I was on the Planning Commission for 6 years in this town, and I'm really concerned on how we define by right. I mean, we every week that we would meet, and I was on the Design Review Committee also for I think 5 of those 6 years. And it seemed like small items. Someone just wants to add a bedroom. That seems very simple. 800 square feet, 600 square feet. Why not? Sure, sounds easy. Those are the ones that took the most time. Those are the ones that we had to go out and do the story polls. Those are the ones that had individual people saying, whoa, 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 what by right do they have to add a bedroom here to overlook my yard, et cetera, et cetera. So when you say by right, just the words itself. By right? Excuse me, can I finish?
Please.
Thanks. That'd be great. You'll get a chance, honest. I worry about that. Those are the things. I mean, I know there's a definition for it, and I'm sure it'd be some way, but that's the thing that concerns me. Go ahead. Now it's your turn.
Thank you for those thoughts. The idea was not to stop design review or story polls, but to suggest that the use itself, if it were a small storefront or a small restaurant downtown fitting into an existing space, that there may be certain uses that might be by right and not require hearing on the use itself. Al had mentioned the concept in the industrial areas of some of the small uses that the Economic Development Advisory Committee mentioned.
Yeah, I think the only problem I have is how do you define what's the minimum? I mean, that's just really, it's hard. Maybe Mr. Gervais, I appreciate the example that it's not residential, that it's commercial. We're a village. I mean, I hate to use this term, we're a village. When I read through this, it was a great report. Don't think that I didn't appreciate reading the 85 pages that was here, because there was a lot of good things in it. But it seemed that a lot of it was for bigger places that were going to grow. And again, maybe I was approaching it from a residential standpoint more, because that's my background, as opposed to commercial or industrial. But residential-wise, I thought, why do we need a lot of this? I mean, we're doing fine, and we're not going to be building subdivisions in this town. They aren't going to happen. But commercial and industrial, different area, maybe not my expertise. And so I looked to staff to sort of do the definitions. But I hate to say, at least from the dais, from my line of saying, I agree with by right. And that's the thing, those words just, they scare me because, like I said, how they could be used. So, again, just comments of I'm sure there are places that could be used.
Yeah, that's very clear guidance on the residential side. But as I noted earlier, what cities do is they go through very methodically, and you look at a retail use. Is it indoor? Is it primary? Is it outdoor? What kind of retail use? And so we can actually do that and go into very specific businesses in very specific commercial zones. I can understand the concern with the residential side, just saying, hey, that's where people live 24/7.
Sure.
And so I think that's good guidance.
I think, but don't we, in effect, we do that now when businesses want to come in, don't we, Mr.
We
Say?
do.
So I guess I'm confused on what, well, again, maybe it's not definable, but we do that now with certain businesses. When we did it with, when someone wanted to come in on Laurel Street and we passed an emergency ordinance, because it just wasn't the right fit. Granted, there was a large piece. It probably wouldn't even been affected by any adjustments that we're going to make to this zoning ordinance. But it's, I don't know, it seems to be working in a lot of this area, and certainly I understand some of the cleanup of this that was written and some of the other stuff. But anyway, I've talked too long. I should let my other council members speak.
Other thoughts?
I was going to give you the knock there, Bob. I agree with Councilman Vasili, especially when it comes to residential. I don't want to see a by right in residential, because these are people's homes, and what is
by right guarantee you. But I also agree with what staff has said, and we kind of talked about this in the general plan. A lot of this is just bringing back stuff that we did talk about in the general plan. And if it's an industrial or commercial use and it's an approved use, it's one of the primary uses for that area, and the building or whatnot's already being used for that, we're just switching users or we're barely modifying, I can see where I would entertain that as a by right. If it's non-conforming, absolutely not. Or if it's something we just don't think will fit. But if you're swapping out a restaurant for a different style restaurant or doing these other little minor tweaks, which I think, Mr. Survey, is what you were talking about, I can definitely see that as a by right, especially when it comes to business and commercial. In residential, absolutely not. But when it comes to business and commercial, I would like to see it. I would like to go through methodically. I mean, this is a broad-based question, so I know you're just trying to gauge where we're sitting. But I'd like to go through it methodically and point to the specific issues where it is by right. But I would definitely entertain it in the commercial and industrial use, as long as you're kind of sticking to the guidelines we already have, essentially. It does just streamline the process, and I would like to see that. So that's it.
I concur.
Yeah, I have comments coming up on some of the other items.
Why don't I go then to question number 2? So, are there some types of projects that should always be subject to design review, regardless of whether we may have some additional standards? And I certainly am hearing that the residential process that you've already got in place would represent an example where we just carry that forward. We may have some additional design standards that came out of the general plan. And the second question is, are there other design issues that we didn't talk about in the paper that you want to make sure are covered?
Yeah, maybe if I could just add, again, experience with the Planning Commission. You showed photographs, examples of residential homes with landscaping and rocks in front, and another house, a craftsman's home. And, of course, one of the things that does happen in real life is what you don't show is what the house on the left looks like and the house on the right looks like. Sometimes there's a 50-foot lot on the left and a 50-foot lot on the right, and we're looking at a, huge lot in which this home wants to be built. So, again, the current process of having a residential design that allows when there is neighborhood concern. Again, the goal is you have all the rules and all that sort of thing, but it all gets down to how does it fit into the neighborhood. We do have some processes that help that. Also, if you go to the design on the other end of the spectrum, the Palo Alto Medical Foundation, the marketplace, and some of the large projects, on the commercial side, we get outside consultants and so forth that work with us. But this whole middle ground, I'm a little more uncertain on. If anywhere from multi-residential to condos and the small commercial stuff, I'm not sure how much we really do there, how much can be more standardized, and how much we do get input, whether or not how important that is, whether or not it fits or adds value or character to our town, what it really looks like and feels like, and the pathways and all the, the setbacks and all those things. I'm not sure how much we really do in that middle category. So,
I can tell you from my perspective, the issue with the larger buildings, let's say a multi-family residential apartment or a condo or the marketplace, these are big buildings. So they have a much bigger visual impact in the community. And coming to this community, there is no design review. There's no formalized design review process in the city. Well, there is an ordinance that says it goes to the Planning Commission. But the issue there is the Planning Commission will then be relying on staff expertise.
Right.
And you're lucky if you get somebody with really good design credentials. So what I've been doing since I've got here is I've essentially established a de facto design review by hiring these outside consultants, which I don't know historically if the city ever did before. So that's something that I brought as a practice that's, I think, because I had to do it. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was the best thing for the community because, again, these are big buildings. and I've seen issues and problems that have been outlined, I think, in this presentation with big walls and things that don't address the street correctly. And so there's a real gap here with the larger buildings. I think that on the smaller scale with the single-family house, I would agree that, there's very personal issues. You have to live next to these houses and your neighbors, and so get it right there. But I think we have another opportunity that would not affect the marketplace in a detrimental way that we could establish either by bolstering the existing residential design review committee or establishing a new committee that would work on the larger multifamily residential or commercial projects that really do have a huge impact on our community.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Thanks for that. One last thing to add, and then turn it over to Mayor. And Mr. Klein's got a question. Would be, I think the other item too is, 20 years from now we may look back and right now the Craftsman's home, as an example, looks wonderful. It's got the porch and the woodwork and we like it. But after you do 100 of them or 200 or 300 of them, the developers and the architects say, well, that works in San Carlos. I know I could get that approved. But 20 years from now, we got all the kind of the same type. I visited a friend last summer in New Jersey where they have a lot of these old structures, and someone came in and started doing a remodel, and the first one or two looked great. Well, now you go down the street, and about half the homes are all done the same way. The garages look the same, the stairs, the type of stone looks the same. I mean, it is just ugly because it's too much of the same. So I do think we need to also be careful that when we develop standards and start doing things, that we allow enough flexibility for variety and change, things that maybe we haven't seen before that we will appreciate 20 years later. Mr. Klein, another comment?
Yeah, just to add on to what the mayor, to what you were saying, and Mr. Savay brought it up. In the General Plan Committee, we talked very heavily about a commercial design review committee, and how since we didn't have that in the town, that was something we needed to discuss for multifamily, but also for commercial development to have a design review for there. So I would like to see that somewhat discussed in the zoning, but also my main concern is always going to be the transition zones. Mm-hmm. It's going to be those single families that abut commercial zones, or those single families that abut areas that we've targeted for development. You see that a lot on Laurel, you see it on the east side and a couple other places. And we discussed thoroughly the form-based codes on the general plan, and I'm very comfortable with that type of design, but we need to be very wary, and I don't want to say strict, but very concerned about those issues where we are going to have this development abutting single-family homes that have existed for 50-plus years. Yes. While we do want those areas to develop, we want them to develop in a respectful way that is respectful to the nature of the neighborhood. While the neighborhood is in flux, there are still people who are going to be there with single-family homes, and we don't want to impact them or have a detriment just because that we decided that would be an area we would develop.
Right. Mr. Mayor, I would just add one point. It was something that we had addressed a couple of sessions back, which is hillside development regulations. It extends beyond just design review, but where we have hills, where those developments go in, stronger regulations about what type of buildings go in there, how they're constructed, what the setbacks are, what are the safety regulations, those are things that we really need to deal with, and I would like to see some stronger regulations around that.
Just one quick comment on design professionals. Again, going back to when I served on the Planning Commission and on the subcommittee, a commercial, I think, as Mr. Klein said, I think that's, and as you mentioned, Mr. Savay, I think that's a really good idea for design professionals on a commercial building. And I mean, I think that works for me. On the individual houses, I worry that Mr. Jones, who's an architect, wants to design the house for the owners, but they've already got an architect and they're presenting a thing, and that's what I worry about, where the dollars just start to climb. I'm not saying you shouldn't have one, but we rely on staff a lot, and I realize there might not be the expertise there, but in some areas. But residential, I'm always concerned that someone's going to, and I'm not saying this in a negative way, but they have an idea of how that house should be built, and maybe the owners don't want it that way. And so I worry about too many design professionals on the residential side of this. That's just me, and when we had our meetings. So, again, I'm sure it'll be fleshed out by other people and have more discussion on it.
Okay, move on to number 3.
Okay, so the basic question under number 3 is whether we should proceed with a new zoning district called a transit-oriented development district, taking the best things that we see in downtown and tailoring them to what would make sense around the Caltrain station.
Mr. Casella.
I just have a quick question. If we did change this, I guess the projects that are already sort of in process already would not be affected by this.
Unless you specifically wanted to do it that way, I would say no. And there's also a resolution that was adopted back in 2004 that really did set sort of the foundation for what we're looking at here in terms of the height, the density allowances that would remain intact. So really that sets the groundwork for whatever we would do in that zone. So I would say that it could if you really wanted to, but that would really be in the design phase, I think, for that particular development. But we're going off of this resolution for the height and density and that kind of thing.
I guess I'm thinking if the project that's proposed right at the moment by Sam Chance would continue, what other development would there be around the Caltrain station?
Well, that is an interesting issue at this time because of the high-speed rail proposal. If there's a viaduct proposal, it could potentially allow for development around or underneath the viaduct itself.
Okay.
So we need to think about that with our zoning.
That's an educational thing for me that Mr. Ahmad, because he's on Samtrans, probably has heard and seen before. Because I'm thinking once you build it there's nothing left around there. So
there's some very real opportunities that we've seen in other countries and back east and things like that. So we've already started. Staff has already started. Maybe perhaps Mr. Ahmad as well has started to kind of look at pictures of that.
Okay. I don't know. A specific district. I don't know. It's that one area. I guess we could.
Through the chair, Mr. Slade, because you're making me question now what we talked about 2 years ago. I was under this, maybe I was wrong, but I thought the transit-oriented district that we discussed in the general plan was a quarter mile away from the Caltrain station. So we're not talking just right flush to it, but we're talking about a quarter mile circle around the Caltrain station, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Right. So there's actually 3 study areas in the general plan that were identified. It's essentially the El Camino corridor, the whole corridor, Old County Road, part of downtown.
Okay, well, again, educated.
Yeah.
Another person who was on another committee I wasn't on. But again, I'm looking to be educated because when I see Caltrain station, I think...
You think right there.
That's it? We're done? Why are we talking about this?
It's a much larger area.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and while we're on that topic, I like to kind of, it may be quarter mile, but it's not only for the people who live in transit-oriented, districts that are basically across the street. If we do something like Transit Village, but to me, it's the movement. It talks about walkability, the movement of people anywhere from a hotel site down on Industrial that could come up San Carlos Avenue to the east side on how you have a what I would call a prescribed natural walkway that people, rather than walk east-west on one of 5 streets, there is one pathway that has the landscaping, that has the safety with traffic. Traffic's diverted maybe more to another street. This is the walkable. People who come downtown to the Art and Wine Fair or the Farmers Market with the stroller and walking, everything that not only goes transit-oriented, but to me, I'm kind of exaggerating it into the downtown on how we create those favorite pathways through the neighborhoods and so forth is part of this. So, I mean, as an example, we all know, or many of us in this room, when you walk from here to downtown, walking through right across the way through the fountain and so forth. So you're not walking on San Carlos Avenue, or you're walking between the historical hacienda adobe 5-6 buildings and the newer structure. There's a walk path there. But then when you get to the street on Walnut, it stops. There's nothing else. actually lawn there without even a stepping stone. You actually have to step into the curb. There's no path. It just stops. Same thing on the east side. It just stops. So we need to have that connectivity that you talk about here.
Mr. A couple of things. I would like to see a TOD ordinance, and I'm going to look obliquely at Director Weil, that a couple of things that I would like to see integrated. So this is going to be more of a coordination thing, is the traffic demand management, the TDM plan, needs to be coordinated here. The reason I'm saying that is that the Transportation Authority does have significant grant money available for us to be able to work how transportation works, how mass transit works, how parking works, and how this development could work. So that is one thing I would like to see. The second part, if we do have a TOD district, I would like to see some discussion of safe routes to school. Where are the schools with relation to the TODs, and how do we start to get kids back and forth there, preferably in a pedestrian fashion? Lastly, I would like to see some discussion put together for what could happen to the Caltrain right-of-way. There are two ways that the Caltrain right-of-way can go. One would be an aerial viaduct. That would mean that the space underneath it, so people who are looking at the berm would essentially be gone, and the east-west connectivity could be tremendous. There should be some discussion that if there is a viaduct, how would we like to develop it, and could we go ahead and start putting in some proactive opportunities for development in there? Part number two would be, if it is a cut-and-cover trench, you would get 800 feet of cover followed by 1,400 feet of trench. That 800-foot section, what would we like to do? How can we start to look at those things? Those are discussions that I would love to see ratcheted up. And those are my comments for that.
Okay. Item 4.
Let's see. 4 is about the restructuring of the residential districts, and by this question I'm really thinking of the medium-density multifamily areas. And a second question is the small lot subdivisions. Well, there still may be one or two very small parcels. When the housing element was done, Al, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there were housing sites identified, a couple of which might lend themselves to these small lots, fee simple kinds of subdivisions. It's been a very effective tool in many cities. It doesn't require a homeowners or condominium association if the ordinance particularly has the standards in place, because many people do want ownership opportunities and not necessarily having to be involved in condominium or planned unit development options. So it's just another tool that suggests itself from the housing element policies that you put in place in the state certified.
Okay. Questions, comments on this? Mr. Gonzalez.
The first one, I'm a little concerned about minimum density and minimum height. I just, again, we're in the residential area, which is just, I just feel there's just, once it's codified in an ordinance, I'm just concerned about it. So, I mean, like I said, I'm not saying I'm against it per se, but I'd have to see the details and what that specifically would mean. And relative to small lot subdivisions, one of the projects when I was in business, we built in South San Francisco a 2,500, the lots were 2,500 square feet. It was a neighborhood, I think we put 30 homes. They were almost 2.5 stories because you had to go up like this. But they were well received. It was their own neighborhood. They were adjacent to some open space, and it was an infill project. So it wasn't like right next to other houses. And I could see how it could possibly work. But I do worry always, of course, with traffic, because when you get a house, then you're going to have a car or two or whatever. And it's good land use. I think multifamily is better land use personally than a smaller lot like that. But I can certainly understand if there was an area that we could possibly do, if it was by itself in an infill area, it might work. But if it's not an infill area, then I worry about the sort of the pushing in more units in an area that would have some difficulty.
I just want to echo Councilman Grisilli's thoughts on that. My issue was like, where would this go? If we were to do small lots up in the hills, it's just going to create more traffic, more cars, more congestion. And I agree, too, that multifamily, that focusing our growth in a certain area is, I believe, better for business, but B, they can be transit-oriented development and have these other issues. But if we were to allow smaller lots just anywhere, that would be a problem. So I'd be willing to look at it, but it would have to be very strict on where these places could go. There would need to be infill areas or areas closer to transit. I wouldn't want them up in the hills or elsewhere where they're just going to add to the congestion that we already have.
It's basically, just to add, just one more thing. I mean, most of the lots are, of course, minimum size almost usually in the old days was 5,000 square feet. Many of the lots, certainly up in the hills, are even higher than that. Well, I could think of 2 or 3 spots right away that you could put a couple of 3 houses on, which would, in effect, be a single-family lot, and it just wouldn't. That's not an infill to me. An infill is a whole bunch of area that you could put in a number of units there. So anyway, just to reflect, I'm going against everything that I did before. But this is, like I said, this is a different time. We're trying to plan out what we want to do. And I'm sure if Mr. Grocott was here tonight, he would have some interesting comments relative to our comments because he's in the design business. But again, he'll have his opportunity, as we all will later on, to talk about this.
So we can certainly drop the minimum density, minimum height as a minimum requirement and proceed to look specifically at where on infill sites this second idea might apply. Be cautious, be careful. And
Okay. Number 5.
so we'll close then, and I think I could do this in Al's stead, is the idea of really picking up and trying to introduce an economic development tax-generating aspects. We had a lot of good success with this in Menlo Park and in some other areas to really look at how can you think through coding these zoning regulations to the bottom line so it pays off for you.
Questions, comments? Mr. Mott?
When I saw the industrial arts portion, that raised my eyebrow, and I thought that was somewhat interesting. 2 things came to mind. Number 1 is the Bohannon project that's being discussed in Menlo Park is going into a somewhat light industrial area. There's going to be a lot of people who are displaced. That may be an interesting place for us to go recruiting. One thing I was thinking about was Tech Shop is out there with a number of members, but the interesting thing that we have that they don't, we're actually close to transit, and there's places for lunch. If you're on that side of 101, on that side of Marsh, you're kind of stuck off in the marsh. So that could be somewhat interesting there. I'd like to see further development of this idea. I don't have a strong, this is what we're looking for, but I'd like to see more meat around this.
My question, I think, is mainly for Mr. Survey. We talked about this on the general plan, and we voted it down, putting like a building and trade district together. How is this different than what we voted down, or is it the same and it's just coming back in a different form?
I would say this is different, pretty significantly different. That was focusing on an industry, one particular area, and saying we want to draw this particular industry to this area. But I think what we're looking at here is an area of, again, if I could, Michael, I'd like to approach, because I have an aerial photograph that may help explain things. Yeah, here you go, right there. This aerial photograph will give you an idea of the lot sizes that I'm talking about. And as you can see here, the lots are right in here. And here's where you had, on Bing Street, you had Tesla, and you can see that these parcels are much larger over here. And so what we'd be talking about is really maintaining the smaller lot sizes and a myriad of businesses that serve our community, not just one industry. And we'd be fostering these kinds of service-related businesses, and again, I use the word artisanal, because if you go down there and you see what's happening, and perhaps I should have some pictures for you next time, you'll see that it's a very unique incubator in our community. And there's nowhere else like this in San Carlos. So what you want to do, I think, for communities is to foster this area, or you'll lose it. It'll be gone. If a big developer comes in, wants to assemble a bunch of property and make it easy for that to happen, then you will lose this part of your economy. You'll lose the diversity that we have, and this place where all these small businesses can go. It's a thriving district. It's run down. It needs some infrastructure upgrades, and the buildings need to be upgraded. And perhaps that's what the city should do, is look at how to foster these types of uses in this community. I've seen it done successfully elsewhere. So that's, I think, the difference is we're not focusing on one industry. It's more like a broad range of services and businesses, and how do you foster the smaller business in our community?
Okay, but this wouldn't in any way preclude people from coming forward with ideas to develop the area. It would just incentivize our attempt to keep it that way, but we're not saying you can't develop it.
Right. Okay. In fact, I mean, if somebody wanted to come in with a development, and tear something down or rebuild, you'd say fine. One thing that I think we would bring to you and bring to the commission is the idea of, well, maybe there's a maximum lot size that you don't want to go over a certain size. I don't know what that is, but you don't want it to become this. Because if it becomes that, then it becomes a manufacturing and an office, and you lose the guy who's selling tile or a guy who's a plumber or electrician. Where do they go? Because it's kind of a dirty use, and you need somewhere in your town where you can make noise and you can use your chemicals and things and serve your citizens. Otherwise, it's gone. You have to go to the next town over or across the bay.
Okay. It was actually one of the things that we discussed. There was a report that came out by I'm going to forget the acronym, but they talked about us not displacing our small industrial uses because it would actually add to, and this had to do with the possibility of putting housing there, it would add to the commute times for people. People would have to go out of town now to get these things, and it would actually increase our carbon footprint than having these things in town. So I just wanted to clarify all that.
Mm-hmm. Al, while you're there, I have a question on when we went through the general plan, there was some discussion here about the corner store.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? What recommendation was there?
Yeah, there was a concept in the general plan, and I think it came from the idea, there's two ideas, I think, surrounding this. One is walkability and creating areas in your community where you can walk to the corner market and you don't have to get in your car. So there's connecting people with these little marketplaces. And the other was in Devonshire area, there's the Devonshire Market.
Right.
And so people see that as somewhere where they go, they can get milk or some bread, and they don't have to get in their car, and it's become this really, it adds character to the neighborhood. So the concept was developed and actually retained in the general plan that said that these neighborhood hubs could be somewhere in residential areas. It didn't say exactly where in the residential neighborhoods, but what it said is that our zoning ordinance should establish standards for the opportunity to have a neighborhood hub somewhere in the residential zones. Mm-hmm. And there would need to be these kinds of considerations about design and noise and compatibility with these neighborhoods.
Sure. And I just look at that, having lived in San Francisco for 4 or 5 years, these little corner stores are not 7-Elevens. There was a negative comment. I don't know why. 7-Eleven's a fine place. But these corner stores are part of the neighborhood. I mean, people utilize them. When you think about all the condos up at Crestview and how much gasoline and brakes people use going up and down the hill to get milk.
I would love to not drive 10 minutes to get milk.
Neighborhoods will support a store that can provide some fresh vegetables and milk and limited items to save those multiple trips up and down the hill. We have a lot of people, and again, our city is flat in downtown, but we got a lot of stuff up on the hill and the top of the hill especially. So I'd be open to doing some consideration of something there that we could help our people there.
Absolutely.
Anything else on item 5 here from the council?
Well, thank you very much, Council and Mayor, for your input, and we'll proceed. Thank you.
Great. Michael, thank you very, very much for your report and excellent presentation.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, new business. Good news, it's the last on our agenda, but we do have, there's a half a dozen items. Let me just summarize. We're dealing from recruiting of city manager to term limits on our commissions, franchise fees for video, police service transfer agreement, strategic property acquisition, and use of redevelopment agency facade improvement program. That's A through F. On new business, we'll start off with 10A, which is consideration of selecting a recruiter for our new city manager and authorized city attorney to finalize and execute a contract on behalf of the city for recruitment services. Mr. Rubens?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. Tonight we have an item to enable you to select one of 3 potential recruiters for the position of permanent city manager. Attached in the staff report are their 3 proposals. I should note that all 3 of the proposed recruiters have a representative here tonight if you have any questions.
Oh, good.
And if you have any questions, and maybe before I go, I'll let the staff report, the brief staff report, speak for itself.
Great. So I see 3 smiling faces. I assume those are the 3. Great. Well, thank you all for coming. Wow, that's great. We're serious about this, and it's a very important job. So with that, how do you want to do this? We've all had time to review the packages and so forth. Want to start from my right or left and talk about your preferences here or considerations for each of these consulting firms? Who'd like to go first?
I guess I can start, Mr. Mayor.
I know I'm going last, so who wants to go first?
That's the advantage you have.
For me, going through all these things, they're all very similar companies, and they all have very, very strong recommendations, and they have all worked in the area. So, it's really 6-5 and pick 'em for me, in all fairness. I did, if I had to choose one, I felt Bob Murray and Associates. That was my personal choice, and we've had discussions about this prior. They've worked in the area. Granted, everybody's worked in the area. They're all fee structures the same. If I had to choose one, I was leaning that way. But they're also very similar, and they're also very well qualified. That I think we can go with any of the 3, and we'll be rightly served by doing it.
Okay.
So I don't think I helped much. Sorry.
Mr. Mott, you look like you're...
Yeah, Mr. Mayor,
any preferences?
Would simply echo what Mr. Klein said, that we have sort of an embarrassment of riches of people to choose from, but in reading through the proposals, Murray was my top choice.
Mr. Casilli.
Well, so we have a discussion. Again, all 3 firms are excellent. They all got good reputations. I'm familiar with 2 of the 3, but I know that all 3 are capable of doing the job. My top one was Peckham and McKinney, basically because they had an extra year on the guarantee. That was a winning point for me, and also I'm sure the others would have this, but specifically indicated a follow-up meeting after the selection was made, and just to make sure we're all working through this. So, but I defer to the mayor on what he would like to do.
Okay. My preference is consistent with 2 council members already. With Bob Murray, my main reason was in some of the examples, I really liked the the criteria of what they were looking at and some of the wording in the candidates: successful tax track record, open door policy, leadership, atmosphere of trust, and I could go on and on and on. But I felt the use of the words in that one example versus some of the others I thought was excellent. Again, reading through all the other two packages, it's kind of like 40, 30, 30. But of my top choice, I would also agree that Bob Murray would be my number one choice. So I think with that, and if there's any discussion, I think I'll entertain a motion with that.
We're going to need public comment.
Oh, yeah. Public comment on this? Or would any of the companies would like to speak?
I don't know that we need to listen to any of the companies, but I mean, that's up to the other council members.
Okay. Any
I think we're good.
comments from public on this? Okay. So with that, can I hear a motion, please?
I just want to try. I'm not terribly great at these. I move resolution number...
Just a motion.
Oh, it's just...
Oh, is it?
I got resolution?
Yeah, resolution, yeah.
Then it is
Maybe I am pretty good at this.
number 88.
Okay, I move resolution number 88, resolution of the City Council selecting, I'm going to get the whole title,
You can read the...
Bob Murray and Associates as recruiter of a permanent city manager for the City of St. Carlos and authorizing the city attorney to finalize and execute a contract on behalf of the city for such services.
Second.
Okay, we have first and second. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Ahmad?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Klein?
Yes.
Mayor Weiss?
Yes. Okay. Thank you all very, very much for coming. Thank you. Moving on to 10B, consideration of an ordinance amending municipal code section 2.24.060, commission members' length of service from 3 consecutive 3-year terms to 2 consecutive 3-year terms. Mr. Moore, I think we could probably do about a 30-second report. I think on this we're pretty familiar with it and move. So.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor and members of council. You probably will recall that earlier this year the council had some discussion about the need to have more residents have an opportunity to serve on a commission. And so there was a request made several months back for staff to draft an ordinance to shorten the term limits from 9 to 6 years. We did work with the city clerk's office to do a survey of neighboring cities, which you see attached. Roughly half the cities don't have term limits at all, and of those that do, they tend to be a little bit shorter than what we have today. They tend to be more in the 4 to 6 year area, which is consistent with the proposed ordinance. I guess the other observation I would make, though, is that, as we noted earlier today, in our last round of recruitments, we've been having some problem getting commission applicants. We have been now out 3 rounds for Park and Rec and Art and Culture, and I think we had 2 candidates for 3 seats. We did, after 2 recruitments, finally get enough people for you to talk to on EDAC, although EDAC does tend to be your most popular commission of all the ones that you have. I would make a couple observations and maybe some suggestions based on past practice. One of the things that councils have done in the past has been to, when you interview candidates for a specific commission, other councils have developed sort of a waiting list, as you were, a bullpen of commissioner candidates that you rank highly so that you don't have to re-interview the next time a seat comes up. You may wish to do that in the future. Also, staff has gotten some feedback from some of the folks who have applied to you a couple times that they've felt that after applying 2 or 3 times that they're probably not going to get an appointment from you and have stopped applying. There's also been some feedback, particularly from female candidates, that they seem to feel that the council tends not to pick female candidates, and so there's been, some of those folks seem to be discouraged. So I think as you move forward, you might want to think along those lines as well as to whether or not you want to move ahead tonight with the term limits.
Okay. Discussion?
Through the chair, I think this really started because I opened my mouth at some point and said that we needed to relook at the way we did this. I think it was our strategic plan retreat, and what I was looking for when I did that was a way for us to re-interview commissioners. So you don't get a 9-year spread. You get 3 years, and you come back and we talk to you about the time you've done, and the council didn't agree with going in that route, and I was worried about, that we would never remove a commissioner, that once you got on, you had 9 years just despite what you've done, and the council has shown that we are willing to pull people off the commissions if we don't agree with the work that's being done or other things. I don't think we need to go this far. I don't think we need to limit
term limits. A lot of people, I don't believe, get to 9 years. At some point, people just get tired and want to move on. We have occasionally had, just like now, had a lack of applicants, and then sometimes we have way too many for one seat, and I think it's cyclical. And I'm fine with knowing that the council has shown that we are willing to look at the commission appointments and not just give it a rubber stamp. I don't see any need for us to do this. I think the three terms is fine. I think it's worked well, and I think we can continue to do it.
Okay. Other thoughts? Mr. Maude? I'm happy to support this ordinance if we want to move forward with a term limit. I would like to see more participation. This evening we saw a number of really terrific candidates come forward for EDAC. So I have to admit I'm a little bit torn. I'd love to see new blood come in and keep going. I would actually be in favor of the term limits to move forward.
Yeah, I have to agree with Mr. Mott. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Please.
Vice Mayor Mott on this one. I think although I only served 6 years on the Planning Commission, and I was done.
We had some big stuff go
I
through.
could have gone to 9, but I chose not to. I look at some of these other cities, and I'm a little surprised. I didn't realize that there's 3, 6, 8 of them that don't even have any term limits, and boy, folks could serve on there for a long time. I think our council, as Mr. Klein said, is much more attentive to our commissions. I think 6 years is good. I think it's time to move on after that for getting new folks on. Nothing against what you said specifically, Mr. Moore, but we have appointed some women. I think the last Park and Rec commissioner we appointed, at least I believe it was.
It was the last two.
The last two were ladies, so I don't know what your sources were, and I'm not going to ask you, but there have been, I don't want to sit up here and think we're all gender specific when we're doing this. I understand you heard comments and you passed them on.
Right.
And
Not my opinion, but the opinion of others.
No, I understand. But in the public record, I just want to make sure that people understand that we have done this. So it hasn't been gender specific.
To add to that, Mr. Grisilli, 66% of the Arts and Culture Commission are female.
There you go. But anyway, I would support this tonight.
Yeah, and I too would support it. Again, the main basis is, 2, 3-year terms. We had 8 candidates a few hours ago for Economic Development Advisory. We actually had one who had served already on traffic and circulation for 8 years, I believe, had gone off for a year. Now he's back looking at something else. Again, we're just looking at the caliber of all 8 candidates that we just had. And actually, we had some discussion, and one discussion of a candidate who talked about arts and culture. There could be some interest there. So we're blessed with having plenty of volunteers that want to serve. I think 2, 3-year terms is a nice balance to keep things moving, keep things fresh, and it does provide people for opportunities to move around or to go off for a year and come back on. So I would support it.
Through the chair, then, if it's appropriate, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Grisilli, before you get to that, I have a question, and we're probably going to need public comment.
Okay.
But my question is, what happens to the current commissioners? Are they grandfathered in under the 9-year clause?
They are until their term comes up, and then they are subject to the limit. And actually, that was a question we had from staff.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess the other thing I'd mention, too, to Councilmember Grisilli, just as a point of information, you asked about what would happen if you didn't have term limits. And actually, when I first started with the city, we didn't. And believe it or not, we had several commissioners who'd been on commissions in excess of 20 years. So there's some value add there, I think.
And so would anybody like to speak on this item? Please, Mr. Salicki. And actually, we have C, D, E, and F still to go. If anybody would like to speak on any of those as we're speaking, just raise your hand and we'll get you up here.
Evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council, Economic Development Manager Mark Sawicki. I was the staff member that Brian referred to because I saw 2 things, and maybe it's just a point of clarification, but in this ordinance, one is it's a cumulative number of years. So, for example, Scott Marsters has been on EDAC, I believe almost 2 terms, is now on the Planning Commission. When he comes up for his next appointment on Planning Commission, I believe he would have to step down. I don't know if that's what you want, but that sounds like what this is saying to me. It's consecutive years on all
Mr. City Attorney, I don't think the ordinance wouldn't be come in. He's already on the planning commission, so he'd be grandfathered in, wouldn't he? Or would he?
I'm reading 2.24.060 just another time here.
It's a good catch, Mr. Sawicki.
I have another one, too.
But that's
Time of service on 2 more commissioners.
Yeah, I think the way it's worded, that would be the scenario that you have, if you have someone who's served more than 6 years, cumulatively, they would not be eligible until they took a 1-year break, and then they could be reappointed. If they happen to be serving concurrently, then you don't double count that time.
So Mr. Marshall would be under this ordinance then?
Yeah, he would be under, at the next time his term is up, so in 3 years.
In 3 years?
Yes.
So in theoretically, he'd only have 3 years on the planning commission?
That's right.
And that assumes that he's serving a 3-year term right now?
Yeah, if he's actually, that's the point you brought up earlier, that he's filling out a term, so it's...
So he only would have like till the end of this term?
Yes.
I'm still not going to support this ordinance, but if you're going to, if the three of you are going to, I think we need to grandfather the people who currently sit on the commissions into the old structure, and this would be for new appointees. I would hope that you would go that way, because these people are appointed under the old rules.
Through the chair, what I would have hoped that, thanks for putting this out, what I would have hoped is that it would be 6 years on a commission.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
So, somebody was on EDAC, you get 6 years. If you move to planning...
It resets.
Yeah, it should go to 0.
So is that how the ordinance is?
But it doesn't look like that's how it's written.
Well, we could make an amendment tonight, and you could still introduce the ordinance tonight with a change, if you reach a consensus on a change that would make it so that different commissions don't count towards the total years of service.
Yeah, I think that's what the intent when we talked about that is that whatever commission you're on, it would reset, and then you'd have 2 3-year terms on that specific commission that you've been appointed to.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, can I, please?
He has another point.
The other point is when somebody,
I think it's the first.
they're set terms, and a lot of our commissioners will fill out somebody else's term. For example, coming up in January, there will be 3 EDAC commissioners up for reappointment. 2 of those commissioners took over someone else's term, so they will not have served 6 years at that point, but if they're appointed, they will go over 6 years. So that's a question, can they be reappointed if they're going to go over 6 years? That's not very clear in the language either.
Okay, good point. So how best to solve that?
My preference, Mr. Mayor, would be that if you're filling out a term, that should not count against 2 full terms. So, given those,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, finish.
All I'm going to say, given the number of changes that we want to make, I would almost want to continue this item and let legal go back and redraft this.
Yeah, I sort of disagree. To me, it's 6 years. Whether they're serving out a term or whatever they are, if they started 1 year, then they get 6 years, however they work it through. And you'd have different people coming up different times, but they serve 6 years. They don't. It's not terms. It's just years. In other words, it's how you spin it. How you look at it. It's just a matter of years. So if someone came in serving out a term of someone for, let's say there was Mr. Jones was on, left after 1 year. Mr. Smith came on, served 2 years. He's got 4 years left in my mind. So he serves a term. That's it. I know it's sort of, maybe it's paperwork trouble, but 6 years.
So I don't have any issue with that. I guess the question would be that if somebody is replacing somebody on a commission who's partially filled a term, can we start the clock at 0? Because again, that language is not in here.
I understand it's not in here. I appreciate that it isn't, and maybe it needs to go back and be reworked. But I would just say it's 6 years.
Well, and I think through the chair that my experience has been that what Councilmember Grisilli is describing is how we've done it on the ground. In other words, if somebody comes in a 1-year term, they get appointed for a full term and then a third partial term. that we focus more attention on the number of years than the number of terms, which I think is what you're describing.
Yeah, that's what I'm pushing for.
And again, to the point the council has made, if that's your intent, we could certainly clarify the wording.
Yeah, so it sounds like council can go with that. So based on Mr. Ahmad's recommendation, you want to bring this back to us next time?
Yeah, we'll reword that one section and bring it back to you to meet your intent.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swicky.
Okay, 10C is establishing an ordinance adding Chapter 5.29 to the San Carlos Municipal Code, establishing franchise fees, PEG fees, and customer service penalties for state video franchise holders providing video services within the city of San Carlos. Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. The need for this new ordinance is a change in the law that occurred in 2007 when the state of California began state franchising of cable and video providers. And what happens over time is eventually all video providers will come under this new state law. Right now in our municipal code, we have provisions for traditional city-granted franchises. We don't have comparable language for the state franchises. We do now have a state franchise that was granted to AT&T. It has not been a high priority item to make this addition in the past because AT&T has not come forward until recently. But now they are on the verge, we believe, of signing the documentation necessary to move ahead. And with that in mind, staff thought it wise to add this section to the municipal code so that if AT&T does in fact come forward, we'll be able to collect franchise fees and manage them under this new regimen. Any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions? Any comments from the public on this item, 10C?
One quick question, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Moore?
Mr. Moore, does this DIVCA ordinance that you're describing, the state law, does that include wireless?
No, this is pretty much for video providers, so this would be primarily for people like Comcast, AT&T, Astound, et cetera.
Great, thank you.
One quick question, Mr. Mayor, I apologize. Having been around Mr. Grocott and I, perhaps we faced this once before where AT&T was coming in. We talked about lovely boxes.
Mm-hmm.
And are we anticipating that they're going to be showing up and wanting to put boxes in my front yard?
Yes.
Okay. I just bring that up for the rest of the council, just to know. And I hopefully, I don't know if we have any rights under that or any strength under that now that there's a state mandate for this. So
what we can do and what the other cities have advised us to do is to work closely with AT&T on the placement of the boxes and to minimize the visual impact. It's interesting to note, I was talking to Vice Mayor Ahmad earlier today, that actually the first 3 box locations were approved by the former Public Works Director, Mr. Mokhtari, which shows how long this has been in process, and all 3 of those boxes were in relatively unobtrusive areas. The other thing that has come forward since we first started working on this is AT&T is now willing to do some landscape screening on some of the more sensitive areas.
I only mentioned that for other council members because that was something that was just, they were going to be able to ram this through. And they did ram it through, actually, through the state legislature to get this when they did it. But anyway.
Only cost them, what was it, $20 million?
$20 million in 90 days, yeah.
The vote was 77 to nothing. What a concept.
Okay, so can I hear a motion on this?
I'll make a motion, Mr. Mayor, to introduce ordinance number
1424.
1424, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of San Carlos, adding Chapter 5.29 to the Municipal Code, establishing franchise fees, PEG fees, and customer service penalties for state video franchise holders providing video service within the City of San Carlos.
Second. Okay, roll call, please.
Councilmember Ahmad?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Klein?
Yes.
Mayor Royce?
Yes. 10D, it's a resolution adopting attachments A and D of the police service transfer agreement between City of San Carlos and the San Mateo County Sheriff's Office.
Good evening, honorable member, members of the City Council, Jeff Maltby, City Manager. Attached to the report is a resolution which would adopt 4 attachments to the original transfer agreement which the City Council adopted on September 2nd. As part of the transfer agreement, one of the main categories of inclusion were personnel changes related to the Memorandum of Understanding that was adopted with the Police Officers Association here in San Carlos and reflected in that transfer agreement. In addition to those personnel matters, The other broad category of inclusion in the transfer agreement were items such as equipment, such as vehicles, firearms, radios, technology, computers, laptops, those kinds of things. That was not ready for adoption on the 2nd. We told you at that time we'd be bringing it back. The sheriff has, and the Board of Supervisors have adopted these attachments already, as submitted to you. A couple of small changes to what's before you this evening that we'd ask you to consider making is amending the resolution to authorize the city manager to sign the transfer agreement. It's not quite worded that way right now. In addition to that, we'd make an amendment to, I believe it's attachment C, under the desktop computers, where it shows a substation need of 10. As of earlier today, the county had asked to purchase 14. We have those available. So we would increase that. It would increase the amount that the county would be paying the city by approximately $2,000. In total, there's a number of items that the county would be purchasing from the city, primarily our fleet of vehicles, but also computers and those types of things. Some of our equipment, belts, leathers, items that the officers wear, safety equipment, those kinds of things. But there are a number of areas where the city's agreeing to put in one-time money to purchase new equipment, such as the primary firearm, the sidearm that the deputies carry for the county is a different weapon than what we carry here in San Carlos. We also felt it prudent to authorize the purchase of fresh bulletproof vests for all the deputies. As you might imagine, when you're making this type of transition, one of the areas that you want to be very clean and very comfortable with is safety equipment, and then, of course, liability claims going forward. So to prevent any confusion in the future, should we have some kind of a mishap or tragedy, we wanted to make sure that equipment was all brand new. In effect, the county would be paying the city approximately $200,000. We would use that as a credit to offset the $600,000 to $700,000 in one-time labor costs that the city has agreed to pay the county as part of the transition. Be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions? Anybody like to speak on this item? Yeah? Can I hear a motion on the resolution here?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution number 2010-89, as amended by Mr. Maltby in his comments, to resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos adopting the amended transfer agreement, attachments A through D, between the City of San Carlos and the San Mateo County Sheriff's Office.
Second. A roll call, please.
Councilmember Ahmad?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Klein?
Yes.
Mayor Royce?
Yes. 10E, consideration of resolution to establish a strategic property acquisition reserve, commit certain funds into reserve, establish a policy to commit proceeds from the future sale of city properties into the strategic property acquisition reserve. Rebecca, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Rebecca Mendenhall, Acting Administrative Services Director. Back in January of this year, the City Council discussed options for the use of the proceeds once the property sale at the corner of Holly and Industrial Road closed with In-N-Out Burger. Based on the minutes of that meeting, council members agreed and concluded that the proceeds should be geared toward funding strategic property acquisitions in the future. On October 11th, council approved a finance agreement for a loan of $1.5 million in proceeds from the sale of that property to the RDA. Over the period of the loan, the agreement will generate interest income of more than $2.5 million. In February of 2003, the City Council approved a sale and transfer of property at 1249 to 1265 San Carlos Avenue to the RDA. The proceeds of that sale were a little over $1 million and were designated at that time to be reserved for future property acquisitions. So before you tonight is a resolution for your approval to commit the proceeds of both of these transactions, including the principal and interest from the RDA financing agreement, into a strategic property acquisition reserve. In addition, the resolution will establish a policy that will commit proceeds of any future sales of city properties into the same reserve. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Questions?
Ms. Mendenhall, before my time, 2003, there was $1.07 million. Where is that now?
It's sitting in the reserve in Fund 25.
Fund 25. And Fund 25 is one that we have tapped for operating costs at various times?
Yes.
Okay. But by doing this tonight, what we're going to do is transfer $1 million out of that. Do you know how much will be left in Fund 25? Sorry, I should have called you early on that.
No, I apologize. I don't have that information in front of me, but I can get that to you.
The only, once you commit this, and I mean, again, I guess we can change it because it's not I worry about setting up some of these special funds because we're just basically not going to be able to tap in if we have an issue that comes up, an emergency that comes up that we may need. So I'm not sure I'm going to be supporting this tonight. So,
If I may, the $1.07 million has already been set aside for future property acquisitions.
But it's sitting in Fund 25.
It's sitting in
which
Fund
means we could
25.
still take it.
No, you can't. It has been designated.
I beg your pardon?
It's been designated.
It has been designated.
Yes.
Okay. And again,
This is just to combine this.
I understand. And again, my only point is sometimes I worry if we designate too much. I mean, I know we need reserves. Believe me, I know more than anybody you need reserves in any business. But once you commit it, then it's committed, and it's restricted in my mind. Committed, restricted, whatever the word is. And I'm just concerned that I don't necessarily have I'm not sure I voted for it in January. Of course, I can't remember whether I did or didn't. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't for the 1.5. But those are my concerns, that once it's there, we're not going to be able to get into it if we have an emergency that we're going to have to tap into. So,
Any other questions or thoughts?
Restricted anyway, so.
Well, I don't have any questions, but I'm willing to discuss after we ask for public comment.
Yeah, I will. Anybody would like to speak on this? Okay.
Okay. My only discussion is I'm pretty sure I backed this in January, but I also can't remember. A lot has happened. And Councilman Grisilli's concerns are the exact reason why I'll be voting for it. I believe we should restrict money that's sold from land sales. I don't want to see it just get wiped out when we're using it as a way to get away from a problem. And I completely understand your viewpoint, but that's why I will be voting for this.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, I believe Councilmember Grocott was actually strongly in favor of this with the idea that we are selling land. We want to do strategic acquisition of property with it, so it shouldn't just be spent on operations. So I think that was the genesis, and I actually agree with that position. We have sold property in the past. Most recently, and now I probably do need Rebecca to help me figure this one out. So the property was sold, from my perspective, that was always construed to be used for strategic acquisition of property, so it was lent back to the RDA to do that.
Correct.
But it wasn't done in a restricted fashion, or
The
what happened?
most recent transaction in
Yes.
October, it was not restricted. So as of right now, the proceeds from that financing agreement could be
From the
used
general fund.
for general fund purposes.
And in the case that we pass this ordinance, what we just did, we would not be able to do?
Yeah, those funds will go to, as I understand, those funds will then go to the restricted fund, right?
The money would be restricted for a specific purpose, which would be property acquisition.
Right.
It could still be loaned to the RDA for the purpose of property acquisition, as long as the interest from the loan was remaining with the principal for the purpose of property acquisition. But you could still do the loan.
No, I think the question was, the money now is being paid back. The RDA is paying us back. Where is that today? That money goes in the general fund.
Yes.
Correct.
Right.
But tomorrow, if we pass this ordinance, it goes to this restricted fund.
Yes, it stays with the principal per the comments from the council in January.
Understand. So I just want to make sure, I wasn't trying to confuse the issue.
Just
But
through the chair, just for clarification, it's not an ordinance before you, it's a resolution. And so that has it's not going to be the force of law, but it's what the council's decided to do with the funds.
Okay, I think ready to make a motion here?
I move to approve City Council Resolution Number
2010-90.
2010-90, a resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos establishing a strategic property acquisition reserve, committing certain funds into reserve, and establishing policy to commit proceeds from future sales of city properties in strategic property acquisition reserve.
Your second on that?
I'll second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Councilmember Ahmad?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
No.
Councilmember Klein?
Yes.
Mayor Royce?
Yes.
Okay.
We're moving here. One more item here. Let's see. Consideration of resolution of the San Carlos Redevelopment Agency approving and adopting a facade improvement program for appropriation of $100,000 of redevelopment agency funding for the program for fiscal year 2010-11. This is a redevelopment agency item of approval.
Good evening, Honorable Agency Chair and Agency Board. Mark Sawicki, Economic Development and Housing Manager. The proposed San Carlos Facade Improvement Program is intended to increase the level of private investment in the facades of buildings in the redevelopment project area by providing a financial incentive for rehabilitation. A proposed program was included in both the city's economic development plan for 2010-2013 and the redevelopment agency's 5-year implementation plan for 2009 to 2014. It's also among the city's 6-month strategic objectives for the current period. At its July 28th meeting, the Economic Development Advisory Commission unanimously voted to recommend the proposed program to the agency for approval. The proposed facade improvement program would award conditional rebates for eligible improvements made to building facades in certain target areas. The rebates would be conditioned on completing work in accordance with program guidelines. There would be an initial geographic focus on the El Camino corridor and Holly Street within the redevelopment project area. This is the most active entryway to San Carlos, and concentrating the first phase of the program on this area is expected to improve the buildings that often shape a visitor's first impression of San Carlos. Other areas of the redevelopment project area could be considered for the program in the future. We propose a total of $100,000 be allocated for this fiscal year. Individual rebate amounts would be awarded for up to the lesser of 50% of total eligible costs, $400 per linear foot of eligible frontage, or $25,000 per property owner or tenant, again, whichever of those is the lesser. So in theory, you could have 4 $25,000 grants or a number of smaller grants. Conditional rebates. Conditional rebate is a term that we used rather than grant because the agency cannot actually just grant the funds. It has to be done in the form of a loan or have some conditions attached. There would actually be something recorded against the property and could be removed after the period runs out, which we've chosen to be 5 years to make sure that the improvements are maintained. If the agency board approves this tonight, the program would be widely announced within approximately 30 days. We would send a letter to all business and property owners making them aware of this opportunity. We would also post it on the city website and the chamber newsletter. We would also have a program evaluation and a report on progress provided to EDAC as early as 6 months after launch and before the end of the fiscal year, and then we would expect EDAC to make a recommendation to the agency board whether to continue, to revise, or expand or terminate the program going forward. I'm available for any questions.
Questions?
So how do people apply for this rebate?
There would be an application. Well, again, we would notify them in advance so that everybody's sort of on the same level playing field. But there would be an application submitted to the Community Development Department. We would review. We would have a set of criteria which are listed in the program guidelines, and we would evaluate them based on those criteria. If there are more applications than we have funds available, then we would rank them and come back to the agency board and say these are the ones that we think you should approve and why.
So how did you come up with the like 25,000 we could do for? I mean, what if like the balance of the demand versus the amount, 100,000? What kind of is your reasoning for the 25,000?
We looked at programs in other communities, sort of, best practices. What are others doing? It needs to be sizable enough to make it worthwhile for somebody to do something. But we also wanted to limit the amount that we were gonna put out in the first year of the program. If it's wildly successful and we think it's doing what we like it to do, then we could consider expanding it. But we just wanted to. This is sort of a pilot first year.
Okay, good. Any questions out there? Public comment on this? Other questions? Okay, I hear a motion, please.
Move adoption of agency resolution.
179.
Resolution of the San Carlos Redevelopment Agency approving and adopting the facade improvement program and appropriating $100,000 in funding for fiscal year 2010-2011.
Second. Roll call, please.
Director Ahmad?
Yes.
Director Grisilli?
Yes.
Director Klein?
Yes.
Chair Royce?
Yes. So we will be adjourning to closed sessions to complete the meeting on two items. 11A is on labor negotiations, and B is on real property negotiations. Mr. Ribbons, anything else to report on closed session here? Before we adjourn to that?
On item 11A, as part of the team of labor negotiators, Janet Bowe is going to be in the closed session. Jeff Maltby, myself, and Mr. Mora will be there as well.
Okay, thank you. We'll be back.